So last year, we were focused on deconstructing narratives and disrupting systems, which sounds like fun, but I can tell you from my day-to-day work is life in the trenches. You really have to want to get it done if you're trying to disrupt systems. So we also wanted to learn or lean into the possibilities and reimagine the future, because when you're living life in the trenches, you can get a little bit depressed when things don't seem to be improving as quickly as you had hoped. And so the beautiful thing about these panel discussions is that it gives us an opportunity to think about what's possible, to dream a little bit together, and reason together with all these brilliant minds that you see on stage today. And today's panel, The Urgency of Now, Mobilizing Community Power. It reminds us that change cannot wait. The cost of inaction is measured in families working 2 or 3 jobs. My work is interacting with a lot of those families, and guess what? They have infants, they're working 2 or 3 jobs, their rent is higher than what they can afford, and the SNAP benefits have been cut off. Now they're back, which is good, but we see these families living day to day, trying to make ends meet in an environment that isn't necessarily supportive of the work that they're doing. This microphone is going to cooperate whether it likes it or not. I trust those brilliant minds over there behind the tech table. They're going to make this microphone cooperate. So we also know that power lives right here in our neighborhoods, in our nonprofits, our businesses, and in each and every one of us. All of you had at least enough power to get yourself out of that bed this morning. Somebody said amen. You put your shoes, your left shoe on the left foot and your right shoe on the right foot. How many of you did that? Right? Yeah. You got your clothes on. You got into transportation. Thank you, sir. Here you go. Check him out. Ooh, I have a hot pink microphone now. You got into whatever transportation mode you used, and you made your way down here. And almost 420 people registered for this event, and you used your personal power to get yourself in this room today. It's that power that we're going to try to tap into today. So you're going to get your turn. Right now, I'm going to introduce the panel, and we're going to hear about how their organizations and they as individuals have used their power to address the issue of poverty. So I want to start with Marcy Bowers. These are not in order, so just wave your hand, Marcy. There she is. She is a part of the statewide poverty network. They focus on building grassroots power to end the cause of poverty and to create opportunities for everyone to prosper. So today is all about how we can mobilize community power, especially in light of the tremendous impact of policies on families right now. So Marcy, I'm going to come back and start with you with a question, but let me just introduce the rest of the panel real quickly so you'll know who's up here. Corbett Mosesley. Wave your hand. Yeah, like you just don't care. There you go. In 2022, Corbett is with the Washington State Department of Commerce, and the Community Reinvestment Project was developed to tackle longstanding racial, economic, and social inequity. And so we appreciate that Corbett is here to talk about how that legislation and the funding that came with it has made a huge difference in our local community. Also want to introduce Marcy Boulay. Woohoo! Hey, Marcy. She's going to talk a lot about the important role that public health plays in our lives as the Communities of Focus coordinator for the health department. Thank you, Marcy, for coming. Many of you know Kathy Littman from the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation. Go ahead and do that wave, Kathy. You got the daffodil wave, yes. And so, as you know, GTCF connects people, knowledge, and funding to build a racially equitable, accessible, and inclusive Pierce County. And so we're thrilled that Kathy's here today. And my new bestest friend, Amy Koo from Tacoma Community House, the Gritty Girls Club. That's what we're going to start calling ourselves. And for over 110 years, Tacoma Community House has helped countless individuals gain the skills they need to transition out of poverty, navigate a new culture, and find personal and professional success. So thank you all for being here today. Let's give the panel a nice warm. We're glad you're here. Okay, so let's start with Marcy Bowers. All right, Marcy. Share with us some of the work that you're doing in community and with community to advance equitable policy solutions, and especially at this moment in time when we see lots of public benefits being reduced or being cut. How are you engaging community members in the work that you're doing?
Okay, does it work? Yes, okay, great. It's very strange to share a stage and a couch with another Marcy B. This has never happened to either one of us before. And we had to figure out where to sit and how to deal with our names. So thank you for any grace that you might extend to us if we get mixed up. I had a lot of prepared remarks, and then I threw them all away as I listened to Matthew talk about what it means to do ethnographic research, what it means to hear from people with lived experience, what it means to combine that with the data, and what does it mean for our work every day. So I work at the Statewide Poverty Action Network. We were founded in response to welfare reform in 1996, so coming up on 30 years. And I don't know that a whole lot has changed in our safety net for the better since 1996. I think we've had a lot of ups and downs. We've had some places where things have gone really well. I think the Affordable Care Act was groundbreaking, and I think we're watching some of those gains slip away with the aforementioned Big Beautiful Bill that passed this summer. So how do we engage people in our work? Our work starts with listening to community members. We travel around the state. We hear what people want. And I think those stories that Matthew shared with us earlier are the kinds of stories we hear. When he talked about you can look at poverty as kind of some data points and a line, that's only one piece of the puzzle for a lot of people. I think all of us have heard stories about, people. One person, I'm looking at my friend Lori out in the audience, talked about that being in poverty is being unable to ever catch a breath. That there is constantly something piling up against you, some new crisis awaiting, some new hoop to jump through, and that shows up in virtually every space, is what we hear from people. So we hear kind of the top things that we hear are people don't have enough money, things cost too much, and people feel treated badly by the systems that are meant to serve them. And so that really has led us to thinking about how do we engage people with lived experience of poverty in not only showing up and testifying in Olympia, but also really helping us think about what policies should we be doing? What are the policies that would have the most impact? Of course, now I'm sitting here thinking, oh God, we're not doing enough on regulatory things. But what we hear is figure out how to get more money in our pockets and figure out how to keep the expenses down. And while you're doing that, stop having our public systems treat us without any dignity and respect. So it's not just our broader systems, right? It's not just like DSHS who takes a lot of the brunt, to be blunt, takes a lot of the brunt of systems treating people badly, but we hear about it in schools, we hear about it in some of our nonprofits, we hear about it in in the healthcare system for sure. Those are the things we hear. And so really trying to think about how do we make policy solutions that address those while also making sure that those policy solutions are galvanizing to people, that people can see themselves in a movement, that people want to speak up and hold their elected leaders accountable. Those are the kinds of things we work on. Kind of the best example that I can think of, or the biggest one, and I actually know several folks in this room from this effort, including Donna, is the 10-year plan to end poverty in Washington State, right? So this was a group of community members, this was state leaders, this was nonprofits, all coming together to write a plan. And we did that with a steering committee of people with lived experience of poverty helping guide the work steer the work, if you will, to really think about what we needed to do. And I can promise you that that plan is good, but it was made better by the involvement of people with lived experience of poverty, but it will only take shape and move if we all come together and say it's a priority to do that plan. So I'm not going to talk your ear off about that plan, but if you want to talk to me afterwards, I will happily talk your ear off about it. So I'm going to move on. I promised I wouldn't talk forever.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcy. I mean, these are really important topics, and we don't get to have you on this panel very often, so we'll probably let you talk a little bit more in just a minute. I want to move now to Corbett Mosesley. Hey, Corbett.
Yes.
All right. A lot of us have heard about the Community Reinvestment Project, the Community Reinvestment Plan. We've heard numbers like $200 million being invested specifically to address barriers to well-being, is what I would call them, for families, for individuals impacted by the war against drugs. So tell us a little bit about how that effort is going and how has it made any difference whatsoever?
So thank you for that question to start off with. A couple of things that I think are important to share is I don't think that there would be the impact of the CRP without the 10-year plan to end poverty. And I think that's important. So for folks that haven't looked at that plan in terms of the blueprint, that's where we started from in designing the CRP. The CRP was a co-designed program from Department of Commerce where legislature said, hey, before you go out and distribute $200 million, you need to come up with a plan with community by the people most impacted. And so we started off with reviewing some of the work and the plans that community had already spoken about, had already weighed in on. And the 10-year plan to end poverty was just that. It was a process that really helped people engage with folks around the state in thinking about what are some of the strategies. And a lot of that work had to do with system redesign. It had to do with co-creation. It had to do with shifting power. And there were a lot of good strategies within that helped inform the CRP. But there also wouldn't be a CRP, I think, in the way that it was designed without United Way of Pierce County, without the Center for Strong Families, without the work in Pierce County and the work that we've been doing for several years. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that good work is built on good work. And to Donna's point that I always heard her share was, what can we do together that we can't do alone? So the CRP has been impactful in distributing $200 million. And, I'm just curious in terms of show of hands, who in here received CRP funds or knows someone that benefited from CRP funds? If we can just do, yeah, okay. So there were well over 400 contracts. With majority buying for organizations, and along four kind of categories of funding: reentry, legal assistance, violence prevention, and the largest bucket was economic development. So over 190,000 people in the state of Washington were served by CRP dollars. We are on track. I could probably talk. I won't similar to Marcy. I'll take some time, but it's been a journey. There is an implementation plan for the next set of CRP funds, but there's also a report that just came out, and we learned a lot through that process in terms of co-creation, doing co-creation models with partners like GTCF. On helping redesign and shifting power with how funds were distributed across the state. leveraging local advisory teams, leveraging community with lived experience, and different processes to distribute resources in a way that have community at the center of that. So it's been a really powerful opportunity. Thank you.
And I know you have a whole lot more in there to share. I'll let you a little bit later, I promise. I want to get to that leadership action team idea, that design with Kathy Littman, maybe speaking a little bit about the Greater Tacoma Community Foundation, and start with your role in the CRP, because it was a really critically important role that you played.
Yeah, I think I'm going to jump a little bit ahead into talking about philanthropy, and which leads into the local advisory team. One of the things that I think people don't realize is professional philanthropy is birthed of the system that is causing the issues. And we are, whether it's corporate or family or community foundation, we are a way for people who have assets to have their voice heard. I don't want to send it off to taxes. I want to invest it in my community. So conceptually, that's a good thing. I also know that what funded Project 2025 was philanthropy. So being aware of your partnership and being aware, this, I was really thinking as Matthew was talking about, what's our complicity? What's our role? And so at the Community Foundation and in our partner community foundations, we really double down on focusing on empowering community voice. We ask a lot, can money do good? Because sometimes it doesn't. And so it's more than just money. And to that point, there's a dichotomy right now in this kind of crisis of, does philanthropy serve or solve? Do we want to deliver more to the food banks? Do we want to solve the problem that's creating that in the first place? And our response is yes and. So we just met with the Global Innovation Design Lab. We had 24 philanthropists, different foundations, different organizations coming together to say, how do you meet this moment? And what is your role? And let's not all jump on the same, we don't want to be like kindergarten soccer. We all don't have to go do the same thing. Let's figure out how to play our roles so that we're supporting each other. And we can serve and we can solve. And at GTCF, we focus on the solving part, and we partner with those that serve, because that's what creates a whole community. So we're leaning into amplifying voice. Can people, if they're given the credible information and support and resources, solve the problems that systems are causing for them? And that was why it was so compelling to partner on the Community Reinvestment Project and think about an alternative way for us to accelerate the way government funds come to communities. And so Corbette's concept of having local advisory teams is bringing people who have the ground experience. We brought a small group that were focused on the pillars of the Community Reinvestment Project, and we took them through the Global Innovation Design Lab. Mainly because we didn't want them to recreate bad practices of philanthropy that we train our nonprofits in. We wanted them to be able to say, how do we look at the impact in the community? Who's having the power? How do we get the funds to those people? And the local advisory team and the folks that were funded through this act, which honestly, we didn't have the money and they didn't have the time and the staff. So we were a perfect partner on this. But it also went to the community in grants. They did not have to write contracts and front fund the money. We did that. And we did it with a coalition across the state. So the folks that were doing the work, whether it's IBJ or whoever was involved in the work, they got the money up front. Go focus on your mission, not focus on, can I find a loan? Am I borrowing from my 401k to fund this? It's go get it done and then bring the learnings back. We find that that's where people, it's that local advisory team and lived experience that tells us what the barriers are. And that's our goal is if we amplify the barriers, it rolls into policy. So if you're living it and you're working it, if the issues can be raised, then that is the role of philanthropy to make sure that that's fed to policymakers to start changing that system.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, so feedback from the system is good. Those local advisory teams, the folks who are actually doing the work are telling you what they need. And thank you for the role that GTCF played in helping to get those CRP funds down to the local level. Marcy, you spend a lot of time at the health department with community. You're the Communities in Focus coordinator. What are you hearing from a public health perspective about what community needs?
Thank you. It's an honor to be on this stage and with all of you here today. I think some of the things that we're hearing aren't going to be any surprise to all of you in the room. They've already been mentioned. But in general, people are having a harder time making ends meet. So transportation, childcare, healthy, affordable food that tastes like home, all of the things that help people thrive are a lot more challenging for folks to attain. And it's particularly more challenging for immigrant and refugee communities and folks who are facing potential detention and folks who are being targeted by that. And so a lot of folks that we work with in community are saying they're really afraid to leave their homes. They're afraid to go out and have those basic needs met, and are really having to think about, I know Amy's going to be talking more about this, but are really having to think about what am I going to do if I get detained? How am I going to make sure that I am protecting my family and that there's income and making plans? So people are stressed across the board and having a difficult time. I think other things that people talk with us about, so I'm going to talk about, my lens is always building community power, and also it's a health lens. So people are really concerned about having their physical health care needs met and having access to care for behavioral well-being too. And I think on a positive note, people are really excited to gather again in spaces both indoors and outdoors, and so finding ways and places for people to gather in a healthy way and to reconnect with one another after a pandemic is really important. So the role that public health plays is, and I know we'll get more into this. I've been thinking a lot about what can we do and what can't we do, representing government. But we play a role of convener, facilitator, co-creator. I love thinking about co-creation, amplifier. And some of the ways that we do that, I'll just give some examples. So we might pull together partners in the community to talk about how we can work together to, sorry, Corbett, just punched you, how we can work together for a grant toward transportation in a rural community. Or we might often we bring partners, including the health department, into the community to talk about what does it look like to improve our parks and open spaces? What would it look like to improve the landscape that we live in so people feel like they can walk around more safely? And so those are some roles that we play, and specifically around food access, because it's been such a whiplash these past few months. I think I would just say community has the solutions. So I have the privilege of working with one of our health equity strategies, Communities of Focus, where folks who live, work, and play in them experience health inequities at a greater rate than folks in other parts of the county. And it's a lot of the root causes we've already started talking about: racism, redlining, lack of access to resources, and really getting to the root causes that contribute to poverty. And the greatest solutions really come from communities. So some of the things we've been able to support, for example, in food access are somebody wanted to fund a community refrigeration right adjacent to a community garden and a community farm. So that makes really good sense. Somebody else wanted to do food preservation classes. Folks wanted to have community gardens where they could make and create food that tastes like home, wherever home is. And we were able to support that. And when innovative solutions, like for any of you who know Goodrich Northwest, who has a really innovative, wonderful locker system that people can access, we worked together with them when they were first starting to ensure that they could meet regulatory requirements to be able to open those lockers. So all of those solutions are born in community where the brilliance lies, and it's a privilege to work with them.
I love that that statement, born in community where the brilliance lies. It's a beautiful way of framing it. Our job, I think our work, part of our work is excavating, right? So doing sort of an archaeological dig into community to unearth that treasure, right? And not assuming that because we have letters after our names that we already know what community needs, because oftentimes we're wrong about that. Amy, you serve a community, largely immigrant community at Tacoma Community House. And Marcy was starting to talk about some of the impacts that we see specifically there. In the child welfare work we see, families are in an interesting position because they don't want to show up for court because they're not certain of what will happen when they get there. They're keeping their children home from school because they're not certain whether or not they or their child will make it back home. So tell us what Tacoma Community House is doing to address some of those specific needs of the immigrant population here in Tacoma, Pierce County.
Carol and Donna, thank you for really including and highlighting the perspective of immigrants in this conversation. I'm really grateful to be here. And I just want to celebrate my fellow panelists because there's something incredibly self-reflective in this conversation on philanthropy, on how we learn from our programs, and that's just so critical at this time. So thank you, and really appreciate this conversation. You know, as I think about how we end poverty and the experience of our clients, what keeps coming to mind is to end poverty, we have to stop and prevent family separation. When we think about a mother or a father or a caretaker being deported and a child being left on their own, or a family not able to afford rent, or the rising cost of basic necessities, we are going to see increased poverty in our community. And so I'll say it again, we have a job right now to keep families united. And at Tacoma Community House, that's one of the really core roles that I believe we play right now in our community, because we are Department of Justice accredited to provide legal immigration services. And so every pathway that we can find that allows people to remain lawfully in the country, that allows them a pathway to citizenship. We have 200,000 green card holders in Washington State that are eligible for citizenship. We need to get them citizenship. Right? There's too many people who have waited and not done that. And we know that suddenly a green card is no longer sufficient to keep people in this country. And so things have to start to change. We have to increase our investment into legal services and make sure that those are available and affordable for every immigrant who's eligible for lawful presence. I also really want to bring in the other programs within Tacoma Community House, and shout out to our education and employment team in the back of the room at Tacoma Community House, who are just doing extraordinary work, preparing people for that citizenship test, helping people with employment and financial coaching. So much of what Matthew talked about today in terms of how we support our immigrant communities in navigating the financial sector, not having to rely on payday loans, but being able to have a bank account, right? All of the things that help prevent poverty and reduce costs for families are so absolutely critical. So the program that we have with Center for Strong Families and United Way is so important at this time. I also want to recognize that there's kind of this narrative out there that immigrants have come to take our jobs, but what we know in Pierce County is that 1 in 4 businesses was started and run by an immigrant or refugee. So what we really have is employment creation, and immigrants are creating jobs. Right? So I want everyone to really hold that narrative and make sure that we're not letting the narrative get hijacked by the media, but that we're really telling very real stories about the impact of immigrants and refugees in our community. When they're willing to take the risk to start a new business, then as a community, I think we all need to step in and support them. So support your small businesses, support immigrant-owned businesses, and it's truly going to make a difference in the lives of our community.
Thank you, Amy. So true. Yeah, and Matthew Desmond talks about that misperception that somehow immigrants are taking our jobs when, based on the data that he's collected, it's a very different story. The fact is that immigrant workers compete against each other, not against citizens, and do work that citizens don't want to do. And I know a lot of you all, there's work we won't do, and especially not at minimum wage. So the narrative around, taking jobs is one that really needs to be better informed. Thank you, Amy, for that. I want to come back now to Marcy, and let's think about what Matthew has proposed, that we can eliminate poverty, and especially the work that you do. You've got extra insight and information about the core, the roots of poverty here in Washington State. So what's the call to action from you? What is it that you want this audience to walk away with today that they can specifically do?
How much time do I have? How many actions?
It depends on how good you're talking.
Okay. Okay.
If it's good, it'll go longer.
Okay. Ooh, so much pressure.
Just
I think
maybe
actually,
2 minutes, no more than 2 minutes.
I think something Amy said just a minute ago about changing the narrative. I think a thing that we do kind of on the more progressive side of the political spectrum is we have a lot of focus on centering people with lived experience. And I think that's a good thing. We absolutely should be doing that. But sometimes where we fall short as a broader community is that we put people with lived experience at the center and then we walk away. Right. And so my first call to action for all of you is to say what it means to be at the center is that it means you have a community of people around you to support you, to amplify you, to bolster you, and to show that we're not going to turn our backs on you when things get hard. And so I think some of the things that Matthew talked about around how do we talk about our tax code, how do we urge our legislators to do something, we shouldn't just be asking people who are living in poverty and can barely find ways to catch a breath to bear the onus of ending poverty in our communities. We shouldn't do that, and we're doing it. So this is my big call to action for all of you is to really surround the people who are in poverty and to bolster and amplify their voices. So I think somewhere there's some little QR codes I sent in and some action items. One of those is there's a big piece of federal legislation that's about to be starting to get implemented in Washington State. That big, beautiful bill, Matthew talked about it, I already mentioned it. It's going to be extremely cumbersome and difficult as that rolls out for people to access basic benefits like healthcare and food. Right now, the SNAP stuff is starting to be implemented. This is outside of all the nonsense about the shutdown, okay? The shutdown's over, people are getting their SNAP benefits again, that's great. But work requirements that are gonna be incredibly onerous are coming up very soon. So some of our state agencies, our Department of Health, our Department of Social and Health Services, they asked the state for some money. They asked the governor, can you give us some money to help implement this and minimize the damage? Okay, we need to tell the governor, get that in your dang budget, okay? There's lots of other solutions. There is no way that our state agencies will be able to treat people with dignity and respect if they are getting all of the money taken out of their budgets from the federal government to implement a less helpful benefit, okay? So that's one thing. You should tell your governor to support some of those proposals to mitigate the harms of H.R. 1, or Big Beautiful Bill. Thank you, Jim Cooper. You should also, while you're talking to the governor, you need to tell him it's time for some progressive revenue, okay? We've already talked about this, okay? I don't know how we're going to end poverty in Washington State if we continue to have the second, most regressive tax system in the country. Only Florida, only Florida is worse than us, okay? That means we charge people with low incomes a higher percentage in state and local taxes of their incomes than any other state in the country except Florida. And we were number 50 until we passed the Working Families Tax Credit 2 years ago and the capital gains tax. So there are ways to get better, but we have to have the political will to do it. And some of us may be impacted by some progressive revenue proposals. And that's what I mean to not abandon the people that we want to center. That's what I mean
Beautiful.
by coming and surrounding and amplifying and bolstering them. We may have to pay a little more in taxes so they can pay a little less.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Marcy. Yeah. And we've got maybe 10 minutes, Donna? How are we doing? I think on time. Maybe 10 minutes. And so share with your neighbor that 10 minutes, the four of you who have a comment left. So I'm going to move on to Corbett and your call to action. What's the one thing that you want this audience to leave here with and maybe do?
I think that I think that the partnerships are critical. I think that, besides what we can do at Commerce, besides what organizations can do, there is that what can we do together that we can't do alone. But to another quote that I always remember from Donna is we're not going to social service our way out of this. And I think it's really critical to partner with communities and organizations and how we do work together better, how we raise up those ideas and how we center around folks and how we shift power dynamics. I think that that's critical in this time. And I also think that we need to pay more attention to the economic side and the income side and the business development side than we pay attention to. I think there's a lot of work related to the safety net of when somebody doesn't have the support that they need or when they're in need. But we don't spend enough time on really the pillars of the Center for Strong Families and how we help people increase their income, decrease their debt, improve their credit score, and have access to the resources that they need that will help them move forward. I think the integration of services is really critical. I think we have way too many programs that are siloed and operate inefficiently, that we don't stack the resources, we don't integrate our programs. There's people that actually have, programs, and you might have one program manager sitting next to each other in the next cubicle that don't really coordinate on things that client is really could really benefit from. So I think we do our community a disservice when we don't partner, when we don't collaborate, when we don't think about the big picture. And we're not really leveraging the resources that we need. So I think that that's got to be a really critical part of how we do the work and how we help communities thrive. To that point of coming alongside and being around the circle of community and helping to distribute resources, we have to do that better.
Thank you very much, Corbett. It's a good transition to Kathy Littman. Since the work that you did at GTCF in distributing the CRP this last year made a huge difference, especially in the work that IBJ is able to do for families. So what's your call to action to this audience? What do you want them to leave here thinking about and deciding to do?
So literally a call to action. Pierce County is blessed with so many networks. We want to be connected. So figuring out in the areas that you care about, and I don't care if it's food or housing or education or transit or environment or the arts, find your soulmates, contribute what you can. Time sometimes is a bigger contribution than money. Follow the data, figure out what's important, and then pay attention to electeds. We spent a lot of time working to get people involved in Census 2020. And the work for Census 2030 is going to be more difficult because people are afraid. It is genuinely unsafe to have your voice heard. Well, okay, let's circle around those people and figure out how they can have trusted partners. We'll take care of Census 2030 by doing the partnerships and the relationships today. And so you all have the ability to make a difference. I would just invite you to find your place in it. And we're not relying on government. We're not relying on big philanthropy. We're relying on each other.
It's old school, but it still works, right? What do you think, Marcy?
Yeah, a couple quick things. The first thing I would say is take care of yourself in the process. It's hard work and it's heart work. And I know this room is full of people that get tired, frustrated, burned out. And living through COVID and helping lead that response in community, we had check-in buddies. Find a way, whoever that is for you, to make sure that you have some that's helping hold you accountable to take care of yourself in the process so you can keep doing the good work that you're doing. And the second thing I would say is so excited to see some youth in the room. Youth have brilliant ideas and solutions for how to make their community better. And we've had the privilege of being part of processes called participatory planning and budgeting, where people get pots of money to design projects and work with the powers that be to implement those projects. And that might look like water bottle filling stations in a school, and that might look like increased lighting in a school. But what we also find, which are brilliant things to implement, and what we also find when we share that power and provide those opportunities, is that young people say they're more likely to vote when they come of age, and they're more likely to participate in civic engagement processes. And with all due respect, we'll need our replacements at some point. And I just think it's really an opportunity to think about sharing power and decision-making with the brilliance of the youth in our community.
I agree with that. And the final voice, Amy Koo.
Yeah,
What's
this is
what's
my
your call to
favorite
action?
topic. I just want everyone to look around at one another, like look at the person next to you, and because I'm talking to every single one of you, and recognize what an extraordinary group of people are here in the room, and every single one of you has a powerful voice. Every single one of you has powerful buying power. Do not underestimate the power of your voice right now to advocate, to stand by your neighbor. Everything we do is important, whether it's advocating, whether it's serving. I'm going to be carrying around my whistle and blowing the whistle on ICE at my school, in my neighborhood. I'm going to make sure that people know that ICE is in the area so that they can move into a safe
Go,
place.
Amy.
It is absolutely critical that we are all thinking about our actions every day to protect our neighbors, to stand by our neighbors. And so I just want to just emphasize just how absolutely critical it is. And you know, I think about my staff all the time, and when I see them having served a family member or a client and having had some success, there's a sort of light up that happens in their eyes, right? A sort of energy that they experience. And so when you start feeling you're going through the downward spiral of doom, you know that feeling where you're like, oh my God, this is bad, everything's bad, I don't know what to do. Serve. Serve, and you will let yourself be served. And in that is the hope. And so, I mean, really, truly, as cliche and cheesy as it sounds, the hope lies in every single one of us, and we really have to take action right now. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Amy. I think it was you that Donna quoted, that maybe we are the ones we've all been waiting for. So thank you all. Thank you to the panel. You can all say thank you.